A massive alien ship appeared in the sky above Earth. It was silent, smooth, and unlike anything humans had ever seen. After a few tense days, the aliens sent a message. They came in peace. Their mission was not to conquer or trade, but to share knowledge. Scientists and leaders around the world were stunned. The aliens called themselves the Solvers. They spoke through light patterns and deep sounds that human machines translated into English. They explained that they had traveled across the stars to find others who could think like them. The Solvers were not warriors or explorers. They were mathematicians. For them, math was everything: language, music, even religion. They believed that all truths in the universe could be found in numbers. As a gift, they offered a strange equation to the people of Earth. They said it had taken them generations to understand even part of it. They invited humanity to try solving it as a test of intelligence. Governments worked fast. Teams of scientists, engineers, and thinkers from all over the world were brought together. Among them was Lisa Harper, a quiet woman with a sharp mind. She wasn't famous, but she saw patterns where others saw noise. Beside her stood Dan Porter, a systems engineer with a love for puzzles and old science fiction movies. They sat in a large room filled with screens and computers, watching lines of numbers scroll endlessly. The equation was beautiful and terrifying. No matter how hard they tried, no one could make sense of it. Weeks passed, then months. Progress was slow. Some gave up. Others argued about what the equation even meant. The aliens remained patient, watching from afar, offering only small hints that confused more than they helped. Lisa kept working. She filled notebooks with ideas. Dan helped her test theories on the big computers. Sometimes they talked late into the night trying to guess what kind of minds could create something so complex. Then one day, a message came from the Solvers. They wanted to meet in space. A small group of humans would be allowed aboard their ship to continue studying the equation. Lisa and Dan were chosen. As they looked up at the alien vessel waiting in orbit, they both felt the same thing: excitement, fear, and the weight of history pressing down on them. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to change everything. The equation became a mystery that no one could crack. It was everywhere, on screens, in research labs, on the walls of university halls. Scientists tried every trick they knew. Supercomputers ran for days without rest. Nothing worked. Lisa Harper kept at it. While others grew tired and moved on, she stayed late in the lab, eyes red from staring at numbers. Dan Porter stayed with her, helping to sort data and keep things running. He wasn't a mathematician, but he understood how machines thought, and sometimes that was just as important. They began to notice small things, repeating patterns, strange shapes hidden in the math. Lisa started to think the equation wasn't like other problems. Maybe it wasn't meant to be solved in the way they expected. What if this isn't really about numbers? She asked one night, flipping through pages of notes. Dan looked up from his screen. Then what is it about? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rewrote part of the equation, not as a formula, but as a story, a sequence of events. Dan watched, curious, as she mapped it out like a timeline. It made no sense at first. But then something clicked. The shape of the numbers looked familiar. It matched the path of a comet that had passed near Earth centuries ago. Dan ran a quick search. Sure enough, the pattern lined up with real cosmic events. They stared at each other. Maybe the aliens aren't trying to tell us something, Lisa said slowly. Maybe they're asking us to see. Dan scratched his head. See what? That was the problem. They still didn't know. Word of their idea spread. Some called it nonsense. Others called it genius. The Solvers, watching from their orbit above Earth, sent a short message. Interesting approach. It wasn't praise. It wasn't blame. It was just a note, like a teacher watching a student try a new method. Still, it gave them hope. More time passed. Lisa and Dan were invited to go aboard the alien ship. The mission was simple: keep studying the equation, but now in the place where the Solvers themselves had worked on it for so long. As they packed their things, Lisa felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Dan joked about not getting lost in space or breaking any alien math rules. But deep down, both of them knew they were stepping into something bigger than they had ever imagined. Lisa Harper and Dan Porter stood on the launch pad, looking up at the small shuttle that would carry them into space. Behind them, reporters and scientists watched in silence. Ahead, the alien ship floated like a dark pearl against the stars. The ride up was quiet. Lisa held her notebook close, as if it might slip away. Dan tapped his fingers on his knee, trying not to look nervous. When they reached the ship, the hatch opened with no sound. A soft light guided them inside. Two solvers waited for them, tall, thin beings with smooth skin that shimmered like water. Their eyes were large and calm. They did not smile, but they did not seem cold either. "Welcome," one of them said, though no mouth moved. The words came directly into their minds. Lisa and Dan were shown to their rooms, small, round spaces with no corners. Everything on the ship felt strange, like it had been built by someone who had never seen Earth. The days that followed were filled with study. The solvers gave them access to parts of the equation they had never seen before. Lisa worked hard, writing notes and testing ideas. Dan helped connect human logic to alien systems, finding ways to make machines talk to each other. But no matter how much data they had, the equation still didn't make full sense. One night, Lisa sat alone in the lab, staring at lines of numbers on a glowing screen. Dan walked in with 2 cups of coffee. He had brought real coffee from Earth, a small comfort in a place made of math and silence. "Still stuck?" he asked, handing her a cup. She nodded. "It's like we're seeing only half the picture." Dan sat beside her. "Maybe we're thinking too small." They tried new things. Dan taught Lisa how some old computer codes used stories to solve problems. She tried using those same ideas on the equation. Slowly, patterns began to shift. Shapes formed. Something new started to take shape. The solvers watched, always quiet, always watching. Sometimes they left notes, short thoughts written in symbols. Once, Lisa found a symbol she recognized. It meant almost there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Then, during a routine flight near a neutron star, the ship passed through a strange wave of energy. Lisa noticed the pattern in the readings matched part of the equation. Her heart pounded. This was it. Something was about to change, and this time, it wasn't the aliens who would find the answer. Lisa stared at the screen, her fingers frozen, above the keyboard. The data from the neutron star passed through the ship's sensors like a ripple in water. Dan stood behind her, watching the numbers scroll by. "This can't be a coincidence," she whispered. The pattern of the energy wave matched part of the equation exactly. No, not just matched. It completed it. Lisa quickly pulled up old notes and ran new calculations. Dan helped where he could, translating human logic into alien math. They worked fast. Hours passed like minutes. Finally, Lisa hit enter on her keyboard and leaned back. The screen changed. A new shape formed in the data, a spiral, unfolding like a flower opening in time-lapse. The solvers who had been watching silently from the edge of the room moved closer. One of them reached out with a long, thin hand and touched the air beside the image. Light danced around their fingers. "You see it now?" The voice came directly into their minds. Lisa nodded slowly. "We do." Dan blinked. "What are we looking at?" Lisa pointed at the spiral. "It's not just math, it's a path, a timeline. This equation, it's not about numbers, it's about events." Dan frowned. "You're saying this thing predicts what happens next?" "Not just that," she said. "It shows how events connect across time, like ripples in a pond." The solvers stepped back. For the first time, they looked surprised. For centuries, they had tried to solve the equation using only pure logic. They built machines, ran endless tests, filled libraries with proofs. But they never thought to treat it like a story. Humans had done what no alien mind could. Dan let out a low whistle. "So we didn't crack the code. We read the story." Lisa smiled, tired but proud. "Sometimes you need a little chaos to understand something too perfect." The solvers began moving quickly, sending messages to each other in bursts of light. More arrived in the lab, silent and focused. They studied the spiral, the timeline, the new way of seeing. Then one of them turned to Lisa and Dan. "Will you help us?" Lisa looked at Dan. He shrugged. "I guess we're not done yet," he said. Outside the ship, stars burned bright. Deep space stretched endlessly in all directions, and inside history was being rewritten, not with weapons or war, but with numbers, stories, and the power of a human mind. Lisa and Dan stayed on the alien ship longer than they had planned. The solvers would not stop asking questions. They wanted to know how Lisa saw the equation as a timeline, how she turned numbers into events, how she made math feel like a story. First, the aliens struggled to understand. Their minds were built for logic, not imagination. They could run calculations faster than any human machine, but they could not guess what might happen next based on feeling or hunch. So Lisa taught them. She showed them how humans used stories to explain the world, how myths, books, and even jokes helped people make sense of chaos. Dan helped by showing how games worked, how rules could be bent, how play was its own kind of thinking. Slowly, the solvers began to change. They started running new tests, this time using human-style thinking. They added wild guesses, emotional, logic, and even nonsense to their models. It was messy, but something shifted. Patterns they had never seen before began to show up in their data. One day, a solver came to Lisa with something strange, a version of the equation that looked different from the original. It moved like a living thing on the screen. "You inspired this?" the solver said in its quiet mind voice. "We did not know this path existed." Dan looked at Lisa and grinned. "Did you just teach aliens how to dream?" Lisa didn't answer right away. She watched the moving spiral with a soft smile. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe we just reminded them that not everything has to be perfect to be true." The solvers began sharing more of their knowledge in return. They gave Lisa access to ancient files, records of their travels across the stars, maps of places no human had ever seen. Dan found himself helping build new ways for humans and solvers to talk, mixing code and language in ways neither species had tried before. Back on Earth, word spread that the two humans were changing how aliens thought. Some called them heroes. Others worried about what might happen if humans had too much influence. But Lisa and Dan didn't care about titles. They were too busy working, learning, and building bridges between minds that had once seemed too different to understand. One night, as they sat together in the ship's quiet lab, Dan looked out the window at the stars. "Do you think we'll ever figure out everything?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "No, but maybe that's the point." Dan smiled. "Messy again?" "Always," she said, and somewhere deep in space a new kind of understanding was beginning. One built not just on math, but on stories, friendship, and the strange, powerful messiness of being human. Lisa Harper and Dan Porter stepped off the alien ship and onto Earth soil again, blinking in the bright sunlight. It felt strange to be back. Their bodies had adjusted to weightlessness, and now gravity seemed heavier than before. Reporters waited behind ropes, cameras flashing. Scientists stood nearby, eager to hear what had happened in space. Government officials greeted them with firm handshakes and quiet questions. But Lisa and Dan just smiled, tired but happy. They were taken to a research center where teams of people waited to hear everything they had learned. For days, they talked about the solvers, the equation, and how numbers could tell stories. They showed slides of data, explained new ideas, and even laughed when asked how they had changed the way aliens thought. No one fully understood, but everyone listened. News of their success spread fast. Schools began teaching new math methods, inspired by what Lisa had discovered. Universities invited her to speak, though she often said no. Dan started working on a small project, trying to build better ways for humans and aliens to talk to each other. Meanwhile, the solvers stayed. In orbit, watching, waiting, learning. They sent gifts, not weapons or gold, but knowledge. New ways to understand time, space, and even human thought. They began asking more questions about music, art, and dreams. They wanted to know why humans told stories, why they laughed at jokes, and how emotions shaped decisions. For the first time, the solvers were not just teachers, they were students. Lisa kept in touch with them through messages and video calls. Sometimes she would send them poems. Sometimes Dan would send them riddles. The solvers tried to answer, often with funny or strange results. One day a message came from the solvers. "We are beginning to see as you do." Dan read it out loud and laughed. Well, that's either really cool or really scary. Lisa just nodded. Probably both. Life on Earth slowly changed. People became more curious about the minds of other species. Governments worked together more, trying to understand what had just happened. Some feared losing control, while others saw a chance for something new. And high above the planet, the alien ship remained, floating like a silent friend. It was no longer just a visitor. It was a partner, and Lisa and Dan, once just two people in a big world, had helped make that possible. Lisa Harper taught at a small college near the coast. She didn't give many speeches or chase fame. She liked quiet mornings, black coffee, and students who asked strange questions. Sometimes, she still got messages from space, notes from the solvers, asking for help with new ideas they were trying to understand. Dan Porter ran a small research lab that worked on human-alien communication. He had built a system that let humans talk to alien machines using simple words and pictures. It wasn't perfect, but it worked better than anyone had hoped. The world had changed since their time aboard the solver ship. People no longer saw math as just numbers. Now they saw it as a way to tell stories, to map time, to understand the flow of events. Schools taught kids to think in patterns, not just rules. Even art and music began to mix with science in new ways in the solvers. They kept visiting. They no longer came only to test minds. Now they came to learn about laughter, dreams, and mistakes. They watched movies, read books, and once tried to write a joke. It was a bad one, but Dan said it counted. One day, a young student asked Lisa a question after class. "How did you solve the equation?" "The aliens couldn't," Lisa smiled. She had been asked this many times, but she always thought about it like it was new. "I didn't solve it," she said. "I looked at it differently." The student frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "The solvers are amazing at math. They can do things we can't even imagine. But they think in straight lines. Everything has to make perfect sense. Humans, we're messy, we guess. We make mistakes. We see shapes in clouds and stories in stars." The student blinked. "So you beat them because you were random?" Lisa laughed. "Not random. Human." Outside, the sky was clear. Birds flew over the ocean. Life went on. And somewhere far away, an alien ship floated in deep space, sending a message across the stars. We are learning to be messy too, because in the end, solving the hardest problems wasn't just about being smart. It was about being different. And sometimes, that was enough.